Hi everyone, my name's Hai. And if you are somehow wondering how can a chicken be up here, then look closely. Okay, never mind that now because I am going to tell you a story. Many of you may have heard about the story Hansel and Gretel. But let's listen to the version spoken or narrated by me. Let's do it. Once upon a time, in the season that the frost killed the apples and froze the wheat, a family in the deep forest had nothing to eat except for the moldy potatoes they had from last year. They didn't have any other things to eat. One day, the father told the two children, Hansel and Gretel, "Hey kids, let's follow me into the forest. Let's have a walk together." They followed, of course, and when they're walking, Hansel, the brother, glanced back. He spied through their stepmother. The stepmother was watching them closely from the window of their cottage. Hansel felt suspicious. He got a bad feeling what might happen next. He was being very suspicious. After a couple of minutes, the father furtively lent the two children a bread. "Here's your last bread. Take it." Hansel was about to break it in half and share it with his sister, Gretel. But because of his bad feeling from the look of his stepmother, he decided to mark his path using the breadcrumbs. He tore the bread into crumbs and then left it on the path while walking with his father. Going deep into the forest, their father announced, "My wife, your stepmother and I had no more money for you, cannot feed you anymore. There is a village near here, so for the sake of your sister, Hansel, please take your sister there." The sister, Gretel, sniffled, cried, and ran behind their father. But their father ran out of the forest, left them there, two of them alone in the deep, dark forest. They couldn't follow their father anymore, and Gretel panicked. But luckily, her brother was calmed. "Don't worry, Gretel. I've marked my path. Let's follow the breadcrumbs." And so they followed the breadcrumbs, but every few steps they lost more of the breadcrumbs. And they wondered why. "Your breadcrumbs, your marking things doesn't work, Hansel. What happened?" Suddenly, they saw a sparrow, kind of like a bird, swooped down, grabbed some crumbs, and fluttered into the trees. And they now knew why. The birds had made your breadcrumbs disappear. What to do now? Gretel panicked, but Hansel was still calm. Suddenly, when they continued to walk, Hansel exclaimed, "I see some clearing up there. Run, run." And so they head to the clearing up, and then there sat a quaint cottage. The quaint cottage was made out entirely of sweets and candies. But you know what? Icicles dripped down from the eaves, the candle lined the windows, and slabs of chocolate shingled the roof. They were very hungry. Overcome with hunger, they ran straight to the candy house and broke off those pieces, devoured them very, very much. Hansel felt pretty dizzy, and he didn't notice the door was being opened by an old woman. "Do I hear someone nibbling on my house?" the old woman asked and wondered herself. Hansel and Gretel felt kind of sorry, but the old woman invited them inside. "How about we come inside and I have more food for you?" They agreed, and Hansel and Gretel's mind seems to be blurred and blinded by candies and by food. So they followed the old woman inside. They were given cakes, foods. The old woman even drew out of a drawer a treasure chest full of gemstones and beautiful, beautiful stones. And they just sat there, played and ate, and played and ate until they dozed off. The next morning, for breakfast, they were fed strawberry cakes. The old woman was very sweet. She asked, "Will you be willing to help me with some chores?" Of course, they agreed, because the old woman seemed very polite and nice to them. "Yes, of course, why not?" they exclaimed. And the old woman pointed to a candy cane latched on top of a bird cage, an enormous bird cage. She asked, "Will you be willing to help me take that candy cane up there? I'm too old and my eyesight is not too good anymore. Please help me." Well, of course, Hansel helped her. And by the moment he entered the bird cage to take that candy cane, he heard a loud click as the door swung shut behind him. He turned back, jostled the door, but the door was latched tightly by the old woman. At that time, Gretel was still sweeping the floor, helping the old woman. She did not notice that Hansel was hoisted himself inside the birdcage, but she heard the click. She turned backward and then felt pretty struck. "Girl," the old woman snarled, "keep on doing your work." Hansel was being trapped, and the wicked witch, now we would call the old woman, wanted to cook Hansel to eat human flesh. That's cruel. But Gretel wanted to mask her shaking voice. Masking her shaken voice, Gretel said in a false cheer, "Is there anything else I can help you with, madam?" "Of course, girl." She took out some ragged apron and some brooms and some mops, and then told her, "You should wash the dishes, do every of the house chores. Do it now, girl," the old woman exclaimed. Gretel panicked, didn't know what to do. She really wanted to rescue his brother, but she could not do anything. She had to obey the old woman's words. What a pity. Every day, the old woman would feed the brother Hansel a lot of cake and food and yummy dishes. Gretel was not fed anything. Every single day, the old woman would pinch and seized Hansel's arm with her claw-like grasp. "You're still very thin. Let's wait a bit more," the old woman said every single day. Hansel also panicked, but he didn't know what to do. One day, Gretel spotted a chicken bone on the floor. She had an idea. She grabbed the chicken bone and tossed it inside the birdcage for Hansel, and then told him, "Let the old woman seize the chicken bone instead of your arms." Hansel did just what he had been told, and one day the old woman lost her patience. "I cannot wait any longer. Girl, bring water inside the crock and let me eat him," she exclaimed. Gretel's stomach dropped. She still obeyed the words of the old woman, and when the bubbles arrived and appeared more and more, the old woman stood on a chair and reached to the cage to unlock the bird cage. Right at that moment, Gretel knew that was her only chance. She was sweeping the floor. She held her broom up high, and with all her might, she snatched and knocked the old woman as well as the bird cage down. Hansel crashed down out of the bird cage. The old woman stumbled backward and fell down onto the ground. Right at that moment, Hansel and Gretel stood up and pushed the old woman inside the bird cage. "Let me out, wicked children!" The old woman did not have her wicked smile anymore, but called the children wicked. The children left the candy house with a treasure chest of the old woman. They snatched the treasure chest and left deep into the forest. Suddenly, they heard some noise. They heard some sounds seeping through the forest. They panicked and hid behind an underbrush. But they, fortunately, felt much more relieved than the first time they entered the deep, dark forest. They felt much less afraid and scared of the darkness. As the noise came closer to them, they realized the familiar sound, and Gretel realized it. "Dad! Dad!" They came rushing towards their father. The father was burst into tears, and his eyes were red from weeping. The father told the children, "I learned my lesson. That stepmother was not here anymore, and I had been looking for you too ever since." The father was still weeping, but he admitted, "But I still did not have anything for you and for us to eat. Hansel and Gretel reassured the father. "Don't worry, father, we'll have a lot to eat." They presented the treasure chest that they took from the candy house to the father, and the weeping turned into laughter, rang through the forest all the way back to their cottage. That's the end of the story. Hope you like it, and bye-bye.